Hello. In this video, I'm going to pick up where I left off with respect to a conversation going on in the Jackrabbit support server. And that is the next update to the DCA module and the Analyzer DCA module. Let's see if we can get this okay. Now those modules are now already online and running. I've set this to an extremely aggressive state using an insane approach. This is full price action with maximum accumulation and in a very aggressive level. And as you can see, it is insanely aggressive. I'm going to turn off these blue arrows because they're just a royal pain. Let's see if it messes everything up. Alright, good. So get rid of those, and now we can see the numbers a little better. Do not, under any circumstances, use this approach unless you have a very deep pocket. Read this carefully. 1,617 total purchases with a current accumulation of 800. So be carefully aware of just how aggressive this can be. But for the purposes of this example, this coin truly proves just how nasty the aggressive side of the DCA module can be. As you can see, even when the market starts trending upwards, the DCA continues to accumulate. This is just a bloodbath waiting to happen to your wallet. I don't recommend using this approach. But there is a way to tone everything down much more reasonably now. This finishes the updated dynamic deviation possibilities along with fine-tuning the dynamic take profit. This update also brings more dynamic fluctuations within the current cycle. And I also simplified the menu drastically. Then we'll cut down a lot of the noise. Now I've already set this up with some changes to show this particular recipe. But the default changes now for deviation, upper and lower, and for take profit are now 2%. I modified these for the purposes of this demonstration. I also removed the use dynamic question as it was just overkill and not really relevant. When you change these numbers, it automatically triggers the dynamic functionality. So as long as these are 0, the system works exactly as you're used to. If you change these, then it changes. And it drastically switches between aggressive and defensive automatically. You don't need to explicitly turn that feature on. So let's set this back to default. And let's talk about dynamic deviation. Now, depending upon how you set this, like take profit, it can start low and increase, or it can start high and decrease. For example, it will take over the life cycle based upon the maximum buys per cycle and fluctuate between 1 to 8% based upon a ratio created by the maximum buy cycle. So this shows at the beginning when your purchases per cycle are low, it uses a 1% or an aggressive deviation. As your purchases per cycle increase, so does the deviation up to 8%. Now we can do this backwards. In the beginning, when your count is low, for example, one cycle has an 8% deviation straight off the board. The second cycle will be 7% deviation. The third purchase will be 6% deviation. So you can go both ways and have it get aggressive the more it accumulates, or have it be defensive the more it accumulates. Or you can just do a flat rate 8% across the board. So this is saying the first purchase is going to be 2% deviation. And then based upon this number, calculate a ratio that will go up to 8% should it get to this. And the number of purchases per cycle will increase this factor as it goes. So it will intelligently accumulate. Okay, I'm going to put this back to 2%. So when both of these are the same, this functions exactly like what you're used to. Okay, now let's focus on the take profit. When they are both the same, standard functionality. Now, let's increase take profit upper boundary to 4%. It's the same context based upon maximum purchase per cycle. As this number grows, comma, and it accumulates according to the number of purchases in the current cycle, it will continue to increase the take profit gradually, so that the more you purchase, the more likely you will be able to get a higher profit ratio. Now that could reverse feed itself and you end up purchasing more if the market is not stable enough. You can also do it backwards, where if your first purchase goes into a sell point, it has to give you a 4%. But as you accumulate, the more you accumulate, the lower the profit goes. So that if you have 100 positions, you're liable to only take profit at 1%. So you can fluctuate either way. This particular scenario is the more you accumulate, the quicker you want out. So you're lowering that bar. Again, a technique that is quite interesting. And you can see dramatically how it impacts all of the various figures. So now let's put this back to default. So now we are 119 trades, 8% deviation. Okay, now we have the aggressive state. Everything is defaulting aggressive because both of these are turned off. So if we go above 20 purchases, it will now switch to a defensive state as soon as that cycle goes above 20. But the fun, if the percentage of the candle is away from the average by so much, let's say 3%, then it switches to a default defensive state. So as soon as the price action is 3% away from the average, it goes defensive. Okay, let's drop this down to give it a little more accumulation. Okay, we have 264 purchases per cycle. So now let's change this to 3%. And it dropped to 35 purchases per cycle. So as you can see, it is very dynamic internally in terms of how it functions and fluctuates. Now let's turn this off. And you'll see the markers change. Trying to get to where I can show you different markers here. I'm going to drop deviation to 1% so you can see the markers really fluctuate and pile up. Okay, so you see a whole cluster of them here. So now let's change this to a 1. Notice how much it drastically reduced the entire process. So as you increase and play with these numbers, you will see huge amounts of differences in just how the system becomes dynamically aware of what's going on around it. And this is just changing one number. Now, what happens if we put it all together? 2,087 total purchases, 906 on full aggressive mode. That is not what I want. That is a bloodbath waiting to happen. And in fact, I'm going to show you just how messed up this whole process is for the aggressive state. I want to focus on this area right here. The aggressive system purchases even when the market is climbing, as long as it's a certain point away from the average. So as you can see, the aggressive state works both ways. It pulls the average down, but even if the price climbs up, it still continues to pull the average down. The defensive system does not do this. A defensive action only allows price to drop, not climb. So as you can see, all of this disappeared. So it's important to realize that when you're using this system, it is bloodthirsty aggressive. It's not something to play with. It will destroy every portfolio that is not prepared for just how much aggression it will exhibit. So, now that we have the basics, let's actually put all of this together to something that works well. Something that can take this hot mess and bring it back down to what my budget can handle. First of all, my first thing I'm going to do, if it's this far away from the average line, soon as the price is outside this boundary, go to defensive. Boom. Right away, instant change. Now, I want my minimum profit to be 1%, but I want it to start out in 2%. Actually, I think I'm going to go crazy with this one. 4%. So if I have 1 or 2 purchases, I want a 4% profit. If I'm accumulating, then my minimum profit, deviation. I got this backwards. This is my deviation. I want my deviation 8%. So as the market really drops, I want 8%. So start out at 1% deviation, and I think I'm going to go 2%. Again, a lot of these numbers are just trial and error to get what you feel comfortable with. So my minimum deviation is 2%. My maximum is 8%. Now, my take profit for small trades, 4%. I want my take profit at 4% if it's within a very close number to the first purchase. So the less number of purchases, the higher I want my profit. So if I start accumulating a lot of purchases, I simply am looking to get out at this point because I've taken on too much. So now let's see how much this is going to look like in the end. So I've gone from that insane amount to basically $500 to $600 using price action. So right here you can see 2 purchases per cycle. First, second purchase, my take profit is going to be 4%. As I accumulate, my take profit gets closer to the average. The more I accumulate, the quicker I want out. As I accumulate, I want my deviation to begin dropping or getting further away from the average. The more I accumulate, the less I want to accumulate. So by putting all of this together, in fact, let's demonstrate this here. You see it. You see how much different these look as it starts sloping. Up here, not as much, but as you can see, it starts getting further and further apart. And that's done over your maximum purchases per cycle. That ratio determines how much distance each deviation will grow between my lower, which is 2%, and my upper, which is 8%. And as this recipe grows and learns and develops, that number will change and develop with it. So this recipe becomes dynamic in its ability to see the market and to be able to get out of the market. And that is the whole point of what you want. You want a system that can dynamically fluctuate in the craziest of markets and still come out with a nice little profit. So even though my minimum profit is 1%, I'm still pulling off an average of 2%. This is important, an average. Now, over time, this average is going to drop to the minimum 1%, but it's still a very good look at just how dynamic this new system really is. Okay, so let's reset everything and go through it again. Let's shut everything back off to the default settings. Yeah, no, that ain't gonna go far. Okay, here's the defaults that everything starts out as. And I still have the aggressive system to help bring all this out. So, 568 purchases for my maximum purchases per cycle. This recipe in its current settings would have one cycle require almost $6,000 to complete. That is crazy and well above what I'm willing to put into this coin. This coin is not a reasonable coin. I don't trade this coin because of this kind of crazy. So, how would I trade this coin? What numbers would I use? Let's go through that part. First of all, right now my default setting has been a minimum of 4% deviation. Okay, so lower boundary, 4%. Now, what would I choose for the upper boundary? A coin like this that is just absolute chaos, I'm going to go 16%. So lower deviation, 4%, 16% for the upper deviation. Look how much it's already reduced the max buys per cycle. We're not done yet though, because right up front, as soon as the price action leaves a certain distance from the average, I'm going to say 3%. If my price action is 3% lower than the average, then I want it reined in and immediately going to a defensive state. Because then it's right off the bat, this is going to be taking on too much beyond a 3% boundary of my average. Okay, we've dropped it down from 94, where's my mouse, to 36. So I just took off 60 transactions with just a very quick change. Now, my default take profit is 2. It's comfortable. I like it. It just does great for me. My minimum fees are 0.5%. If I start racking up a lot of traffic, I want out. So start high. For example, 1 position, 5 positions. Okay, 2% is good. If I'm already up to 30 positions, that's $300. My thought is, get me out of this mess right now because it's going wrong. And that is how I would trade this coin. This is a mechanism I would use to bring this coin back down to earth. And as you can see, it adjusts appropriately based upon the actual dynamics of this coin. Now this process works specific for the DCA module and the combination DCA analyzer. And speaking of which, that module is well on the way to getting migrated into the mainline system. It has been doing pretty well, and I'm pleased with the results thus far. So the new system, the dynamic take profit, the dynamic price methodology, and I should say the dynamic aggressive defensive methodology, because this works with both price and step. It's just not as obvious with the step. So here you are, a system that grows, develops, fluctuates, and learns. Truly capable of taking on this insane market. Now, you don't have to use all these bells and whistles. If you feel comfortable with just a flat 2% take profit, you don't need to change it. If you want to explore other options like what I've done here with this incredibly aggressive recipe, you have the tools to do so. And that really is what this is about. Picking the right tool for your personal risk assessment. Picking the right tool for your budget. And as you can see, as we go back in time, you'll see the fluctuations between a deviation and a take profit. And you'll see the fluctuations between the average and the deviation. Excuse me, the average and the take profit. I got that backwards here. So between the average and the take profit, you'll see one set of numbers, and between the average and the deviation, you'll see another. And you'll see how the system actually grows dynamically and changes dynamically based upon what you are actually trading. And that is the whole central point of everything. For the system to trade and do well. For example, based upon my settings, this is going to be a 4% profit, or 2% by my settings. Alright, let's change my take profit to 4%. Let's see how it changes this map. So a purchase, it climbs 4%. So one purchase, sell off at 4%. One purchase, sell off at 4%. So as you can see, the market does sustain this kind of a system. Not always the best approach, but it does do it quite gracefully. Check your market for your volatility. You might be able to get away with a lot of craziness. This system really does allow a wide latitude. Let's go higher. Let's see what happens if I set my take profit to 5%. Okay, it's still sustainable. Still sustainable. Still going here. Okay, we're starting to see changes now. Let's just go crazy. Not that crazy. Let's see if TradingView's caching system is screwing me up. And it probably is, because shows here that it started to trade and got out, but this isn't the first cycle. So let's see if I can trick the system. Sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes they disable it on me just to prevent me from doing this. It worked. It's a dirty trick, but sometimes it works. Sometimes you can trick TradingView into looting more history. But be warned, it doesn't always work, and they'll give you complaints when you do try it. Okay, as you can see the distance here to here, that's a 10% take profit. So it does work the way you would expect it to, but sometimes the visuals are a little strange. So let's see if I can break it. Let's go right here. So we're going to replay. There's what it sees. Now, is it going to let me do it, or am I going to break it? It's actually doing it. Neat little trick that sometimes works. And you can actually see through the playback how this system is actually going to work. And it is indeed working. Of course, you can also go bar by bar and click on it if you're looking for a particular situation. Or you can simply sit here and let it play out. So, play with the numbers. Remember, this is much about a visual experience as it is a mathematical experience. And sometimes little tricks like this one can help you get more information, but don't count on them. Because sometimes TradingView gets wise to the tactics and will actually disable this section on you for a while as a penalty for abusing it. So you do want to be aware that you need to use it judiciously. But let's simply get to the bottom of it. Okay, we broke this system, nothing new. Let's get out of it. There we are. So 10% was the start. You see it's dropping closer and closer. You can do some crazy things with this system now. I don't know if I would go overkill, because the higher the take profit, the more accumulation you're going to acquire. So you want to be aware of that. But you have a system now where you can bring even the most aggressive recipes down to earth. And it will dynamically adjust appropriate to your risk assessment. Play with the numbers, tweak them, study them. Most importantly, figure out what is necessary for your own personal risk assessment. This is both the Analyzer DCA module and the regular DCA module itself. And it does have an impact on your profits when it's working right. So let's see if I can get this to trigger. I might have overloaded the system. So let's save it. Okay, so as you can see, I scrambled it, so let's try to reload it. See if I can get a fresh calculation. Sometimes you end up with this kind of a situation with the analyzer. So you want to be aware that it does happen. You can mess up the analyzer when you pull little tricks like that. Let's move to the 5-minute. Okay, we got it back online. You can see the various results. You can see the accumulation cycles. So be aware that the analyzer is funny. This is TradingView's internal system, and you can do weird things to it, like what I just demonstrated. So there you have it, the latest release and rendition of the DCA module. I don't know that I need to really think about adding anything else at this point to it, as I think I've pretty much made it almost artificially intelligent. And now, coupled with a new scaling feature, the DSR, it can be a pretty powerful tool and combination. But as always, carefully test, carefully evaluate, and make sure you plan appropriate to your worst case scenario as common case. Until next time.